All right, well, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be looking at scenario number 4 in the TSA Teams 2013 competition on information security. And what we'll be looking at in scenario 4 is going to be, again, a little bit different. If you look at the PDF with me, you'll see that what scenario 4 is asking is, it says, engineers can design solutions to protect websites from organized cyber attacks by protesters whose intention is to slow down or shut down a web server. So we're going to look at two different things, one that's slightly unrelated and one that is completely what we're looking at here in terms of some of the new threats that have been on the horizon in the past 5 to 7 years and really have gotten a lot of press coverage. They've gotten a lot of interest in the news media and even among just regular everyday people. And so this is really something that has become a very big deal. It has been a huge embarrassment to companies large and small, to governments across the world, and really is something that we need to think about in terms of what bad guys can do from across the world when they group together for their own common interests. And so let's go ahead and jump into all of this. And one of the terms that I want to introduce to you right now is a term called hacktivism. You may have heard of it, you may not have. Essentially what hacktivism is, a good definition is right here. It says the use of computers and computer networks as a means of protest to promote political ends. Now think about that with me for just a second. Why is this so dangerous? Why is this so scary? Here's why I think it's so dangerous. Because what it does, when you're promoting political ends and political means for the reason of you hacking a company or breaking into a company or stealing or leaking information from a company or a government, essentially what you're allowing people to do is say, hey, why don't you guys all band together around this common cause? And why don't you guys all say, you know what, we are going to make a point and we are going to do something highly unethical to prove a point of something else that honestly we think is unethical. It's really kind of ironic, I think. And so a lot of the motives for all of this, they are political, they can be ethical, as I will show you, especially in some of the incidents in Kenya coming up that I'll talk about. They could be religious. There really are a lot of reasons that hacktivism is perpetrated, but most people would agree, most experts, including myself, would agree that political motive is really kind of the crux and the centerpiece to hacktivism and why it's so dangerous and why it's being perpetrated as it is right now. And so, again, one of the things that makes this so scary is that it has been a true threat, and it really has caused problems. And it's this issue where all of these people across the world may have nothing in common other than maybe computer expertise, security expertise, and they're banding around a political objective. And so that's what makes this so dangerous. You don't have to be in the same place. You don't have to be in the same physical location. I could be here in Kentucky and someone else could be in Switzerland. It really doesn't matter where you are at. So this really has proven, unfortunately, to be a legitimate threat, especially large business and governments. But here's what we know. What affects large businesses affects small businesses. I was just reading in the news the other day that a group associated with Anonymous had broken into the Federal Reserve and essentially they had stolen some credentials for U.S. bank employees. Well, I know many people that bank with U.S. Bank, both business owners and just regular consumers. And those things that affect the bank that they bank with, it affects them too. So really, these incidents of hacktivism, really, they do affect everybody. They really do. So the first thing I want to look at is a group called WikiLeaks, and this isn't exactly dealing with the scenario itself, but it does get into it in a roundabout way, and I need to cover it because this becomes very important in another scenario that'll be coming up on what's called data loss prevention. Okay, so with WikiLeaks, they're a little bit different than some of the other groups that you had seen, and they have been very popular in the past few years. There's a guy by the name of Julian Assange, and he is the founder of WikiLeaks. He's one that's created it. And what they do is when they obtain or have been given secret or very sensitive data from businesses or governments, they typically publish it for the internet at large to see with no restrictions at all. Now this is pretty scary stuff, isn't it? If you look at some of the history, they've published information from the Afghanistan War, from some of the U.S. Reports. And we've seen quite a bit from that, unfortunately, and how war was conducted, etc. They've published information in Kenya. Remember I was talking about in the last slide that sometimes it's for reasons of ethical reasons or corruption, and that's one of the things that they published information for and about from what was going on in Kenya that you can read about. And then also Guantanamo Bay. They published a lot of secret documents from the U.S. government about Guantanamo, how everything was handled. We saw a lot of things in the past few years in terms of torture and other mechanisms that may or may not have been used at Guantanamo Bay, and a lot of argument because when all this stuff was brought to light, the American public and the press weren't very well aware of it at the time, and these documents released by WikiLeaks created a big fuss in the media over all this, and a lot of argument and a lot of debate. So those were very important. Also, at one point, WikiLeaks had released a lot of secret U.S. State Department cables, and what cables are essentially is intended to be sensitive or secret information from one party to another or one group to another within the government, and specifically these came out from the U.S. State Department, so under Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's watch, and so really this became a very big embarrassment. Some of the cables were not important, or really, I shouldn't say not important, not pertinent to being newsworthy, although others definitely were. And so WikiLeaks is a big problem. These guys are always taking this data and always making it known, and they come from different sources, but really it's become a headache for governments and businesses across the world. Another one, and this is the one we really want to focus on today, is a group called Anonymous. Now, some of you may have seen this logo right here. I'm sure that many of you have heard of Anonymous in the news. You can't hardly watch or be aware of world news without hearing about Anonymous. And what Anonymous are, they kind of describe themselves as a hacktivist group that that represents a globally diverse group of users. They're anarchic in nature. They kind of form a digitized global collective, and I think that's a fantastic definition if you think about it. Really what they are is they form together around a political objective and a political means, and they are anarchic, and they'll be the first to tell you that. They are all about anarchy when it needs to happen, when the motives kind of justify it, the pragmatism, the ends justify the means in their minds. And they are really truly a digitized collective, and they're global. They're across the world. They're not all in the United States. They're not all in Europe. In fact, we don't know where all of the members of Anonymous are, and in fact, Anonymous itself is rather kind of disjointed. I mean, it's easy to kind of join and leave. There's no real rite of passage, and so because of this, it really has become a collective that is formed together over essentially being just what their name is, and that's Anonymous. And that's really what has made it so powerful. So what is Anonymous doing right now? What do they say about themselves? Well, they say they oppose internet censorship and surveillance of all kinds. So, for example, they had several different hacking attempts, successful, I might add, against companies and governments over SOPA. If you are not familiar with SOPA, it was an act that the U.S. government was at the time considering that essentially was going to be monitoring and give more power for the government to essentially watch internet traffic and thereby control it. And so Anonymous really had a lot of problems with that, and they highly publicized it by means of hacking and breaking into different websites and different corporate and government networks. So that's one of the big things that they're against completely, not just in the United States, but anywhere. They are always against internet censorship and surveillance, and believe everything should be private, and I should be able to do what I want. A second one, though, is they really truly, as I've mentioned, they have and they will continue to break into government and corporate websites, and they don't do it just to do it. It's not like a lot of the hacking in the old days where it was done just for reputation. I would argue that reputation is involved with what Anonymous is doing, but even more so, I would say that the reason they're doing this is to make a point. And every time they break into something, they will publish on their Twitter feed and elsewhere, hey, we did this, and here's why we did this. And so in their minds, breaking in, getting information, releasing that information, whether it be credentials, credit card numbers, financial information, secret information, whatever, is essentially what they are trying to go after to prove a political point. Now, one of the reasons that Anonymous is so easy to spot spot when they're in public, at least when they band together in a physical way and kind of break out of this digitized collective, is they're known for wearing those Guy Fawkes masks. And if you had ever seen the movie V for Vendetta, this is one of the places, one of the movies that really made this popular, this mask. And so I've got a couple pictures here of purported anonymous members hiding behind these masks, and they really are kind of scary and creepy, aren't they? At least I think so every time I see it. If I saw those people in real life, I'd just want to stay away. And so really that's who these people are hiding behind that mask. If you've seen the movie V for Vendetta, you kind of get the idea of, hey, if the masses all buck against the system together, then who's going to stop us, right? And that really is their thinking and their mindset. Now, we can't guarantee that any of these people in these pictures are actually members of Anonymous because, again, of the loose nature of the organization, but we can assume they probably are. But again, because of who they are and how they operate, well, we don't really know. It's very easy to hide in Anonymous, and that's why it's been so popular. Now, what are some ways that Anonymous and other similar hacktivist groups like LulzSec, if you've ever heard of them, and others, what are some of the ways that they attack? Well, one of the biggest, one of the most effective, because it's simple and because it's powerful and it almost always works, is what's called distributed denial of service attacks. And these really truly are not very sophisticated. In order to be effective with them, they can be somewhat sophisticated in terms of having a large network of attacking machines at your disposal. But the distributed denial of service, or I'm going to call it DDoS from now on, just so I can say it shorter, these DDoS attacks themselves are not very hard. Here's what's basically happening. If I'm going to DDoS attack you, I'm going to flood your traffic with useless information. Now, there's a variety of technical ways this can happen, a variety of protocols I can use, a variety of methodologies I can use for this, but really, essentially, they all boil down to the same thing. I am going to fire at you more traffic than you can possibly handle, and all of it's going to be useless, so that when your normal users try to get there with useful and true information, they're really trying to get to your site, because of your network load, you can't handle it. Does that make sense? So essentially, they're just flooding you with information to where everything shuts down, whether it's good traffic or bad traffic. And that's really what's going on. Now, the key to make this happen, though, is it takes thousands of participants. It is not possible to shut down a large site by just firing up one of these DDoS tools and just attempting it on your own computer. It won't work. It just won't work. We have to have gigs and gigs and gigs of traffic. I was looking at some statistics, and even back in 2007, 2008, the successful DDoS attacks were taking in the neighborhood of 40 gigabits a second. So even years ago, 5 years ago or so, maybe even close to 6 years ago, it took 40 gigs of traffic to shut stuff down. I don't even, now in today's day and age, it takes even more, significantly more. So it takes a lot of machines to do this. Now here's the way this happens. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term botnet or not, but one of the more popular ways this happens, and statistically this is one of the best ways that these attacks are perpetrated, is that these bad guys have a group of botnet machines. And really what botnet machines are just normal computers. It could be your own computer at home just to scare you, and they have been infected with some kind of malware. Now this malware isn't, a lot of times it's not doing anything other than listening for a command and control server to call it up and give it operations. And so that's why we call it a botnet. It's a whole network across the world of essentially robots at your command, if you want to think about it that way. And what a bad guy will do is he'll call up, he'll send a message to all of the machines in his botnet, they'll all respond, and they'll all essentially say, yes sir, we're waiting for your command. And so what he'll do is then he will fire up a tool, a DDoS tool, and he will simultaneously across all his 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 botnet machines, fire up a DDoS tool and have them all attack at the same time. And that is what makes it so dangerous. And so we're not going to talk about how a machine becomes a botnet or what botnets look like or how we stop them, but essentially, again, a botnet is just a whole group of machines that have been compromised by some malware and are essentially just waiting for a command and control mechanism to talk to them and tell them what to do and when to do it. And otherwise, they stay silent. And that's really what a botnet is. Okay, so the fact is, sometimes these DDoS attacks work, and I really shouldn't say sometimes, I should say often it works. But sometimes it does not work. So if you look in the history of DDoS attacks, Amazon had one, and they successfully survived it. Pretty impressive on their part. Makes them look good, makes them look like their tech is set up correctly and set up well. It's pretty impressive. but others that are even larger than Amazon, Visa, MasterCard, these guys have failed. So if you look at it, we're not talking about small mom and pops here. We're talking about the mega corporations that have all been brought down. Look at this graphic here of MasterCard. You see this? Look how long they were down. You see this? One day, 13 hours, 23 minutes and 24 seconds. That MasterCard was down. This is in 2010. That is killer for them. That is absolutely outrageously embarrassing and horrible for business. I don't know how much money they lost, but we can easily say in the millions, if not more. So this is an example. If MasterCard can be shut down, who else could be shut down, right? So this is a real issue. Now let me show you one of these tools, and I show you this tool not so you'll use it. These tools are easy to detect. These, just as a warning, these tools, your ISP at home will discover this, and you could get in a significant amount of trouble for using these tools. So I'm showing this to you not for you to try and go and use it, but to show you what they use and how non-sophisticated they are. And really, again, they're very easy to detect as well, especially from your ISP that is controlling your pipe of internet out. So this one's called the Low Orbit Ion Cannon. It's a very simple tool. In fact, it's rather humorous if you start looking at some of the language and grammar in here. So this one, what we're pointing to is a URL, mastercard.com, and we lock on, it gives us this IP address, right? And then essentially we pop this kill button, which it says, I'm a charging my laser, is what it says. And you pop that, and what it does is it sends out non-stop traffic as much as it can with this information right here. So we're using a TCP-based attack, 10 threads at a time. We are waiting for replies, and here's in the message, a cat is fine too, and whatever that says. I'm not even going to try. See this? So, and we're obviously got the speed scaled way up. Now, again, all by itself, low orbit ion cannon, it's not going to hurt anything. But when you're running this times 10,000, times 100,000, and people's typical networks of, 1 meg up to 15 meg up, this can get pretty powerful, and this can really shut someone down. So this is an example of a tool, and what ISPs would do if your machine was part of a botnet and started doing this automatically. Yeah, they might shut yours down. A good ISP will find it quickly and shut it down. But what about the thousands of others that are also out there? And that's really what makes tools like this so dangerous. So now the question becomes, okay, I understand how DDoSes work. I understand how dangerous they are. I understand they can take everybody down. How do we stop them? Okay, so let's look at this. There are some ways to stop this. First of all, let's go all the way back to WikiLeaks. In the case of WikiLeaks, in the case of data leakage, we're going to cover this more in another scenario, but first of all, you need to have an overall corporate plan to protect your sensitive data. And what this plan should entail is essentially this: what information is important to us? What information is sensitive? What information is super sensitive? What information is not sensitive? And here's the thing, a lot of times information that you may not think is sensitive actually is. Information that may include job titles and maybe a corporate internal telephone number, direct line in to somebody. Maybe some kind of PDF document that documents maybe log files from the last year. You might think, that's not important. Well, really, it could be for a bad guy, for someone who really knows what he's looking for. Other data may not be, right? Your corporate website. Obviously, that's public information. Maybe the direct telephone line to get in, public information. Even the IP address, your public web page's IP address. Anyone can do a DNS lookup and find that. So public information. But what we're talking about here, what this plan will do for you is essentially allow you to identify information that's important and not important, and then help you from there decide how do we protect that important information. And so it's not going to say, it's not going to look across the entire organization and say, identify specifically what's important. It's just going to say these types of information are important. So if ever we generate new information with this type, it now becomes important. So I hope that makes sense. Military has been doing that for a long time. And you've probably heard of that in terms of classified, secret, top secret, all those different levels of clearance. All right, another tool though, once we have a plan in place, now we need some physical or some real actual tools to help us out. And one big one, and again, we're going to talk about this later, but is data loss prevention, or what's called DLP. And DLP has been huge in the industry. It's been a big buzzword among vendors for the past 3-4 years. You go to any conference and DLP is a huge part of any of these conferences. And really what these devices are doing is they sit in your network and they're looking to prevent against data loss, whether by theft, whether by malicious insider use, or I didn't even put this in here, but maybe accidental use. Maybe I meant to send a PDF out to somebody and I sent the wrong PDF. Hey, it can happen. right? And so these DLP devices, they have agents and clients that should be running on all your end user machines. They should be running on the network. They should be filtering email. They should be filtering web traffic. And if you think about it, it's really kind of complex because they've got to look everywhere. What are ways data leaks out? Well, USB, right? Email, right? CD or DVD drives, right? All kinds of methods, and so, and plenty more than that. So we need to be aware of where our data is in transit and at rest and know how to protect it. And that's what DLP devices are trying to do. So that's one thing for WikiLeaks and other information leak-based attacks. Now, what about DDoS attacks? Well, first of all, we need to have better security configurations. We need to secure our computers and our servers properly. So for example, if you're running Cisco, you might want to consider using TCP Intercept, which is a very neat little tool set in your routers that can help. Now, is TCP Intercept, again, we're not going to talk about how that works technically in this lecture, but is TCP Intercept, is that something that's going to help us right now and against a large attack? No, but it will help in many cases for smaller DDoS attacks or even for other simple hacking attempts. But still, that's one tool, one layer of security. Another thing that you might want to consider is mod security. Mod security is good for helping against DDoS attacks. It also, by the way, is very helpful, and I didn't mention this, but it's very helpful against cross-site scripting attacks. Mod security is very helpful against SQL injection, all kinds of other things. It really is a web application firewall, or it's a set of configurations that run on top of a web server. So you would put mod security installed on IIS for Microsoft, or you can install mod security on top of Apache, for example, which is an open source web server. So mod security is a great way to further configure your current network gear. Now, another thing, now I'll just tell you that this alone is not enough to stop a DDoS. It is not enough because of the amount of traffic that you're getting in a big DDoS attack. So one of the things that you can do is consider outsourcing, and this is an important example. Akamai or Akemi, I really can never say the name right. I'm just going to say Akamai. It's a Hawaiian word, so that's probably why I can't say it. I wish I was a Hawaiian and then I could tell you, and then I'd be out on the beach instead of in Kentucky. But anyways, they are a company that specializes in assisting in DDoS prevention. They do a few other services as well, but this is one of the ones they are well known for. And so they do a couple of different things. One of the things they do is DNS caching. And caching is simply, it helps against DNS-based attacks. And if you don't know what DNS is, it's essentially a service that runs on your network that translates IP addresses to names. And so, for example, how many of us remember what one of Google's IP addresses are? Well, nobody, right? But we know Google.com, right? MurrayState.edu. No one knows, including myself. I can never remember what Murray State's public web server is. I just remember MurrayState.edu. DNS transfers an IP address to a name for humans to make life easier on the internet. Would you imagine having a big black book of IP addresses? It'd be miserable, right? So DNS is doing that for us. Now, Akamai provides DNS caching, and what this does is it essentially allows us to have millions and millions of DNS requests per minute and help us from getting shut down. Because one of the ways that a DDoS attack can work is by attacking your DNS infrastructure. And if you attack it enough and it can't respond anymore, then no one knows how to get to your website unless they remember your IP address. And so Akamai does provide DNS caching, and that's a huge help. Another thing they do is DNS redirection. So in the case that you are beginning to get flooded with traffic, and let's say you have several different data centers. You've got a data center here in Murray, you've got a data center in Oregon, you've got a data center in Switzerland, right, to use Switzerland again. What Akamai can do is they can redirect requests to different data centers or different physical locations that all serve the same data. And the reason that you would want to do this is in the case of one server, one data center getting overloaded, then we have load balancing. And so DNS redirection can help in terms of load balancing. It can help in terms of turning away bad guys to somewhere else. It can do all kinds of neat things. And so Akamai really can help against DDoS attacks by caching and by DNS redirection. Now, here's one last super helpful way to defend. Now, this is an expensive solution, but if you're a large company and let's say your State Farm insurance, and you can't afford to go offline, you can't afford even for 3 hours to be out of commission on your data network, then a Clean Pipes-based solution is a good one for you. And so what Clean Pipes does is it's specifically dedicated to preventing against DDoS attacks. It is supposed to both detect them and mitigate them. Now this graphic has come from Arbor Networks, and Arbor Networks is the industry leader in clean pipes and DDoS scrubbing and prevention. And I'm going to show you a couple of things, but first of all let's go through this graphic because I think this will help. What we're showing here is here on this transit edge we have perhaps, this is showing just 2 networks, and on this network we have 2 bad guys and 2 legitimate people. 2 bad guys, 2 legitimate people. Now you're thinking, what network would have 2 and 2? Well, this is just an example. So imagine this is all of Verizon's network, the Verizon's Fios network, and let's say this is all of Comcast network. So instead of 2 and 2, multiply this, times thousands if not millions. Exponentially multiply this in your mind. Okay? So we have both, in this case, we have both bad guys and good guys coming in. The red line represents bad guys on a DDoS attack. The green represents legitimate traffic that needs to get through for business purposes. Down here in this network, there's no good guys, at least no good guys sending messages to them. It's all bad. Okay, so we have lots of bad traffic, a little bit of good. Now, what happens is all this traffic hits at these routers right here, and these routers are serving somewhere on the internet. It's not too super important to think where they are right now, but they've gotten through a large part of the internet, and they hit these routers. These routers make no decisions on is this traffic good or is this traffic bad. You see how they both still pass the traffic through? Bad and good. Bad, just like it came in. All these routers are specifically doing is saying, hey, here's traffic is trying to get to back here. I know how to get there. You need to go here, and you need to go here. Okay, that's all routers are doing. That's all they're supposed to do is route traffic from here to here. We can't let them. They are handling the front line of all this traffic. Imagine, and remember, a router's not going to handle just 2 connections in. This is an example. It might be having thousands, if not millions, of connections coming in per second. So a router needs to be dedicated just to routing traffic, and that's it. Not security. Maybe a margin of security, but not full security. It's just handling primarily its major responsibility is routing. Now, it hits these devices here. They're now making a decision. Notice here, these 2 things are doing a couple of things. One, they have a connection back here to this peak flow analysis, and it's doing net flow analysis. And I'm not going to talk about that yet. I'll come back to that. And then they also have a connection that comes down to this scrubbing center. So look at this. All of this traffic gets routed from here to here, and all this traffic gets routed from here to here and ends up coming down here into the scrubbing center. And here's where the real magic happens. Once it hits this scrubbing center, and again, remember, maybe other traffic that's destined to go to Google is going a different way and going a different way, right? But all the traffic that's supposed to be coming here gets routed to this scrubbing center. This is a large cloud. It's not just one device. It's a large cloud of multiple devices. It hits this scrubbing center, and here's where the analysis takes place. And here's where it analyzes and says, okay, is this real traffic or is this false DDoS traffic? Now the nice thing is usually, like I said before, it's pretty easy to detect DDoS traffic, right? I mean, look at this example, right? It's not, most of the time it's pretty easy to detect it. So once it hits here, it gets scrubbed out. The bad stuff gets scrubbed out, never to reappear again. And the green, good traffic, hits out, hits this router, and hits our network back here. Does this make sense? So this is a way of funneling only legitimate traffic. And again, remember, we're assuming that this network here, this back edge network, can't handle nearly as much of a load as all this traffic up here can, or all these devices up here can. So this one, because he's actually processing the data and getting information maybe from a database and returning it back and everything it might be doing, this has to be protected from the DDoS attack itself. And for networks that don't do this, and the red attacks come in right to here, this is why sites get shut down and can't handle that load. But now if this guy, it's like he doesn't even know he's being DDoSed. It's pretty awesome. Now, I said this right here. This is an analysis engine. So this is what is constantly looking at all this traffic to see, are we being DDoSed, or maybe some other kind of attack, and how much are we facing, how dangerous is it, how bad is it, what's it doing. And so it's a great way for analysis. And most of these devices here are all Cisco devices, which support what's called Cisco's NetFlow. And NetFlow is basically a way to see your network analysis. And so it's got that engine in it, and it's running and seeing the results. So very, very, very cool scenario. Now let me show you, we're about done in terms of this scenario, but let me show you Clean Arbor's network, because there's some very, very neat stuff that I can show you, and I think would be very helpful for you to know. So if we bring this up, here is, let's see there, ooh, we've got some craziness on our fonts. Here we go. Okay. So let's bring this over. Boy, I don't know what's happened here with my formatting. That's a little strange. There we go. So let's go ahead and look. If you go to Arbor's website, arbornetworks.com, I'm on their DDoS side right here that you can get. You just type in ddos.arbornetworks.com, and here's what's very neat. They are always having threat activity that you can currently see. So this is across the world, and very, very neat to see. We can click on global attacks, and again, this is only the information that they see. So it's not necessarily a guarantee of what's going around across the country. It's just what they see going across the country. In other words, this is traffic that's being reported back to Arbor Networks from their own devices across the world. So there could be something major going on and their devices don't see it. Well, it won't show up here. Hope that makes sense. So we can see some VNC network scanning attacks right now are the biggest thing. We're seeing about 388 attacks per subnet, and a subnet is essentially a small network or just a network, really. Let's think about it that way. Negative 11% change from yesterday, though, and 28% of all traffic that's malicious of attacks right now are VNC scanning. Interesting, huh? So we could go and look some more information up about this, and we see the ports that are going on with this attack, and I'm sure if you looked up, you'd see plenty of exploits available for VNC, which is why they're looking. Another one for setup.php, which typically will show some very juicy information and may allow a further network compromise by an SQL injection, for example. And then so on and so forth. So these are always changing depending upon what threats are out there and what kind of vulnerabilities are out there at the moment and before a vendor patches it. Then a vendor like IIS patches this, then guess what will happen? They patch it, and then it's not effective anymore on the internet, and this will kind of disappear and something else will take its place. And then now we see the ports by service. These are all, by service, by country. Look at this. Is it any surprise China is the #1 attacker right now? 315 attacks per subnet, and 23% of all attacks that Arbor Networks sees is coming from China. No surprise. Now, the US might surprise you as #2. Very, very interesting stuff, and we can keep going down through here and keep looking at further information. Very, very helpful for security administrators. Let me show you one other one. How about just denial of service attacks? Okay, now this is all denial of service attacks. So misuse is the biggest, 1321, and it looks like UDP is the biggest perpetrators, the biggest protocol for it. Also, we see TCP SYN attacks. Remember I was talking about DNS-based attacks? That's #3. So you can see how many are going on right now that Arbor Networks is aware of. So look at this, guys. Right now, at the time of this lecture that I'm giving, there are 416 distributed denial of service attacks going on right now. Pretty amazing. Now we look down here, the sources of these attacks. Remember, these are from botnets from all over the place, right? US is #1. Again, that makes sense because everyone wants to attack the US, but China has plenty. Canada, France, Ukraine, so on and so forth. We see where all these attacks are originating from in terms of, remember, these are all distributed attacks, so these are where these botnets are coming from, okay? And then we can keep going down and see all this. So Arbor Networks is aware of all of these, very much aware. Now we can click on DDoS attacks. This is, well, actually, I think this is maybe actually the same link. It's kind of strange. Global activity map. That's what I was wanting to show you. So this is a cool way to kind of see it graphically on where everything is going on right now. Can't really click on anything, just kind of global activity, but still very, very cool to see. We might be able to actually add a few things in, but there we go. Attack sources, phishing websites that they're aware of, botnet IRC servers. Now these are the servers that are all the command and control servers that are connecting to their bots. And then if we click here, here's where all the bots are located. Now one dot may just show one, but there could be 10,000 located in that area. So anyways, so that covers scenario 4. That shows everything about what's going on with cyber attacks by protesters, by Hacktivism, by anonymous WikiLeaks and others. I hope you found that helpful. In the next scenario, scenario 5, we'll pick up into that scenario, which will be dealing with Wi-Fi hotspots. So we'll get back to wireless again for a little bit and how to secure Wi-Fi hotspots. So thank you for listening to this lecture, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned quite a bit.